This is History Myths and Mythconceptions. And today's mythconception is Aristotle defended slavery. Many people these days spread the idea that Aristotle supported, defended, approved slavery. And therefore, he was a terrible person. He was worse than us, nice and advanced people. Here's an amusing example from modern pop culture, just to keep things interesting for the viewers. This is a scene from the TV show called The Good Place. The characters get to heaven, the good place, and one of them expects to meet Greek philosophers there.
Is Aristotle going to be there?
Sorry, Chidi. Aristotle's in the bad place. He defended slavery.
Socrates.
No, too annoying. Very loud chewer.
Plato.
Slavery again.
That's just disgusting. But people say stuff like that all the time, and we need to address it. Three things here. First, stop transporting modern concepts and ideas into the distant past for the sake of judging people there. They lived in a different society. George Washington never used an electric toothbrush because he was an imbecile. We all can agree that this phrase is offensive and devoid of logic. Second, it is generally not a good thing to take the position of moral authority when you're discussing someone who has much more moral authority than you. Especially when you're doing this because of the current political climate. Like in this particular product of the American film industry. Americans abolished slavery like yesterday, and it was a quite brutal form of slavery based on race. Americans ended segregation, more or less, like 5 minutes ago. It is understandable that they frequently repeat this mantra of slavery is bad, and it is probably considered as some kind of virtue. Yeah, if you repeat it 1,000 times, you might actually start believing this. But don't transmit the guilt, the traumas and political agenda of your society to everyone around you, and especially to people who died a very long time ago. Third thing, there is more than one way to interpret the words of Aristotle. And yes, Plato is usually not a subject of weird accusations. It mostly reserved to Aristotle, who actually spent a bit of time to talk about slavery, mostly in the first book of his Politics. And yes, people usually bring up this particular section of his work. And this is what we're gonna talk about right now. This is the subject of our video. Let's get Plato out of the way. There is no discussion specifically on the subject of slavery in Plato's works. So we don't know if he defended slavery, what kind of slavery he defended, what were his ideas exactly. Slavery is obviously mentioned in Plato's dialogues, but you have to look for it. You can find quotes on slavery, for example, in the Laws, you can find it in Gorgias. Yes, he obviously wasn't an abolitionist, because nobody was an abolitionist, and his views were probably, as we can see from the quotes, comparable to Aristotle. So let's concentrate on Aristotle. Okay, the subject of slavery, different types of slavery throughout the history, slavery in ancient Greece in particular, definitions of slavery, etc. This is a complex subject that can't be covered in one short video. With that in mind, we open the books of Aristotle. And we read his ideas on slavery in general based on the concept of slavery they had in ancient Greece. He discusses things like natural slavery, when a person is not enslaved, for example, as a result of the warfare, but basically born a natural slave who is inherently worse than a freeman and needs a master. He's still human and should be treated as a human, but he's not on the same level. I obviously simplify things here. This is a short video, not a lecture. The problem here is that if you read carefully and you understand that all of this is written in the context of the ancient Greek civilization, the concept of natural slavery, as explained by Aristotle, can be interpreted as a concealed attack on the established institution of slavery. Aristotle is one of the few people in ancient Greece who comes really close to openly declaring that he opposes most forms of slavery that existed in his time. And Aristotle should be read without modern prejudice and preconceptions. This is a work of a certain time period, certain society, and yes, Aristotle understood slavery very well, better than modern people. His opinions may seem a bit alien today, but they have a lot of value. One of the interesting aspects of Aristotle's thought is that in regards to this concept of natural slavery, as opposed to slavery by law, of which he is kind of skeptical, he explicitly formulated the idea that natural slavery makes sense because master and slave have the same interest. A justifiable form of slavery for him is essentially when it is profitable to both parties. And one of the ways it can be explained, and in fact was explained many times, is that Aristotle, in a way, describes the situation when a person is unable of a certain level of performance and requires a legal guardian. Basically, this justifiable slavery, so to speak, is the form of slavery that exists in modern society. People just don't call it slavery. This word has very bad connotations. A person with a mental disability who has a legal guardian appointed by the court is a slave, Aristotelian slave. I bet that Americans never say stuff like John F. Kennedy burns in hell because he treated mentally deficient people as slaves and advocated slavery as an institution. That would be too much. It is much nicer and much safer to attack Aristotle. There is no human society without one form of slavery or another. Prison system is a form of slavery too. 500 years into the future, people might actually say a couple of interesting things about that. It is a terrible thing to promote the idea that the greatest minds of antiquity were bad and stupid people. Epictetus, one of the most prominent philosophers of Rome, Greek in origin, was born a slave and spent his formative years as a slave. A great deal of his discourses is dedicated to a problem of freedom and, first and foremost, inner freedom. But he never proposed to abolish slavery. Why? Probably because he was a bad person. He's probably in hell right now. In the end, get your hands off Aristotle. He was a better human being than you'll ever be.